The discipline of staying calm under pressure. The unseen warfare. The problem is rarely the external threat, it's how your mind reacts to it. Most people spend their entire lives fighting the wrong war. They battle the traffic, the deadline, the critic, the volatile market, or the sudden domestic crisis, completely unaware that the true destruction is happening entirely inside their own minds. They believe their stress is caused by the external trigger, failing to see that the trigger is merely a neutral event. The suffering is self-authored. It is the product of an internal script that has gone unmonitored, unchecked, and untamed. Under pressure, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. When the stakes are maximized, your conscious desires for success, peace, or victory are completely irrelevant. Your biology takes over. If your internal architecture is built on a foundation of reactive emotional loops, you will default to panic. If your psychological scaffolding is weak, you will bend, snap, and break under the weight of external expectations. This text is not a guide on how to become someone entirely new. It is an engineering blueprint designed to help you strip away the social conditioning, the frantic noise, and the historical trauma that has clouded your judgment. It is a return to the person you were always meant to be, an individual of unshakable composure, clear vision, and deliberate execution. Calm is not the absence of chaos. Calm is the absolute mastery of it. It is the realization that the world can be burning around you, yet inside the command center of your mind, the air is clean, the lights are steady, and the strategy is absolute. Chapter 1: The Paradox of Silence. The paradox. Silence is louder than speech. When pressure mounts, the untrained mind demands that you speak, defend, argue, and react. The ego screams for visibility, assuming that whoever makes the most noise holds the most power. But the inverse is true. The real leverage belongs entirely to the individual who can sit comfortably in the heavy vacuum of a pause. Silence is not emptiness, it is a profound presence. It is a wall against which the emotional waves of others break and dissolve. The psychological mechanism. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine that desperately craves safety, predictability, and familiarity. The mind loves problems because they represent known territory. Even a miserable problem feels safer to the subconscious than an unknown void. When an emergency strikes, your primitive amygdala interprets a lack of immediate action or speech as vulnerability. It views a pause as a vacuum, and it rushes to fill that vacuum with whatever raw material it has on hand: panic, immediate text messages, defensive justifications, and frantic movement. The untrained mind consistently confuses motion with progress. It would rather run 1,000 miles in the wrong direction than sit still for 4 seconds to determine the correct path. The practical tool: the 4-second calibration. To disrupt this default evolutionary loop, you must install an intentional circuit breaker within your nervous system. This tool is known as the 4-second calibration. When a high-stress signal enters your environment, whether it is a hostile email, a devastating financial report, or a personal insult, you will grant yourself a mandatory, non-negotiable 4-second delay before any word is spoken, any email is drafted, or any physical action is taken. External stress signal, mandatory 4-second calibration, objective data processing, deliberate response. During these 4 seconds, your single objective is to become a scientist observing your own biology. Watch your heart rate spike, observe the sudden urge to snap back or defend your ego. Do not suppress these feelings, simply document them as raw, unpolished data. Let the biochemical wave peak and break against your silence. By the time the 4th second concludes, the primitive brain has yielded control back to the prefrontal cortex, allowing you to respond with precision rather than reacting with panic. The identity anchor. I am the anchor, not the storm. Chapter 2: The Illusion of Positive Thinking. The paradox. Empty positivity is an unstable architecture built on shifting sand. Telling yourself that everything will be fine during a crisis is not a display of mental discipline. It is a manifestation of psychological cowardice. Forced optimism is merely a cosmetic mask applied over deep-seated terror. True strength does not lie in pretending the storm isn't real, it lies in acknowledging the severity of the gale while systematically reinforcing the integrity of your hull. The psychological mechanism. Your brain is incredibly sophisticated. It recognizes the canyon-wide gap between forced positive affirmations and cold reality. When you attempt to code a high-pressure situation in toxic, unearned positivity, your subconscious mind immediately flags the contradiction. This creates acute cognitive dissonance, which the brain interprets as a threat to its survival. The result? A secondary wave of deeper, more insidious anxiety. By lying to yourself about the gravity of a situation, you break internal trust with your own intuition. You signal to your subconscious that you are too weak to look at the truth, which utterly destroys your baseline confidence. The practical tool, disciplined thinking. The alternative to positive thinking is disciplined thinking. This is the clinical, unemotional acceptance of discomfort and reality. When pressure spikes, execute the following 3-step protocol. The worst-case audit. Mentally fast-forward to the absolute worst possible outcome of the current crisis. Strip the horror from it and look at it clearly. If the business fails, if the deal collapses, if the relationship ends, what does that look like? The scaffolding build. Accept that worst-case scenario as a survivable data point. Build a step-by-step structural plan to navigate that exact scenario if it occurs. The tactical execution. Once the baseline safety net is built, return your focus entirely to the present moment. Look at the immediate facts, ignore the emotional commentary, and execute the next logical move. You do not hope for ease, you design for impact. The identity anchor. I do not wish for ease, I command my focus. Chapter 3, Reframing Crisis as Data. The paradox. The obstacle is not an attack, it is information. The moment you personalize a problem, the moment you ask, why is this happening to me? You forfeit your authority to solve it. A crisis does not care about your feelings, your history, or your sense of fairness. It is simply a collection of variables that have shifted out of alignment. The individual who views a crisis through the lens of a victim is blind, the individual who views it as raw, unprocessed data possesses ultimate clarity. The psychological mechanism. Under intense pressure, the ego instinctively internalizes external chaotic events. Because the primitive brain perceives threats through an egocentric lens, it converts a routine business setback, a macroeconomic downturn, or a difficult interpersonal conversation into a personal, coordinated attack on your identity. Untrained mind, external event, why is this happening to me? Personalization, emotional clouding and defensive panic. Disciplined mind, external event, what is this information telling me? Data reframing, strategic calibration. The practical tool, the fact-story separation. To strip the ego out of the equation, use the fact-story separation. Take a physical piece of paper or open a blank digital document and draw a single vertical line down the exact center, the fact column, objective data, the story column, emotional fiction. The client canceled the contract. The bank account has $4,200 remaining. The deadline is in 48 hours. They hate working with me. I am going to lose everything. I am incompetent and a fraud. Look at the right column. Realize that every sentence on that side is an expensive fiction engineered by an insecure ego. Mentally or physically cross out the entire right column. It does not exist. It has no bearing on reality. Operate, allocate resources, and make decisions based entirely on the left column. The identity anchor. Emotions are data, not commands. Chapter 4, Strategic Detachment. The paradox. To win the game, you must step off the board. The more desperate you are for a specific outcome, the more leverage you hand over to the pressure. The individual who wants a deal too badly will concede everything. The leader who is terrified of conflict will tolerate disrespect. Desperation is a scent that chaos can smell from miles away. Strategic detachment is not apathy, it is the ultimate position of power. It is the ability to care deeply about execution while remaining entirely detached from the immediate validation of the result. The psychological mechanism. When the stakes are high, the mind tends to over-index on immediate feedback loops. Your survival mechanics cause your vision to narrow, both literally and metaphorically. Your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate accelerates, and you become psychologically trapped within the microscopic details of the panic. You lose sight of the long-term trajectory because you are hyper-focused on the minor friction right in front of your face. You become a piece on the chessboard being moved by the hands of circumstance, rather than the player orchestrating the entire board. The practical tool, the third-person blueprint. To break out of the microscopic trap, utilize the third-person blueprint. When you feel the walls closing in during a high-stakes scenario, you must mentally extract your consciousness from your physical body. Imagine your awareness rising 20 feet into the air, looking down at the room. View your current pressure point as if you are an elite military strategist observing a digital map from a secure, remote command center. When conducting your internal monologue during this state, forbid the use of first-person pronouns like I, me, or my. Instead, refer to yourself strictly by your own name or in the third person. Incorrect internal dialogue: I don't know how I am going to fix this mistake before the meeting. Correct internal dialogue: the current situation requires, name, to restructure the presentation slides. The objective is to highlight the budget variance transparently and offer two solutions. Name, will execute this now. This linguistic shift instantly reduces cognitive load and dampens amygdala activation, restoring immediate executive function. The identity anchor. Not everything deserves my energy. Chapter 5, The Fortress of Attention. The paradox. You do not protect your time, you protect your attention. Time is an infinite commodity that will march forward regardless of your actions, but your attention is a hyperfinite resource that is constantly under siege. In a culture designed to monetize your distraction, a focused mind is an anomaly. Under pressure, the world will attempt to steal your attention through 1,000 minor cuts, pings, notifications, opinions, and secondary emergencies. If you let them through your gates, you are complicit in your own defeat. The psychological mechanism. In moments of high stress, the brain enters a state of scattered hypervigilance. It frantically scans the horizon, looking for more things to worry about, falsely believing that identifying more threats equals safety. This cognitive flaw leaves the gates of your mental territory wide open. You begin checking news feeds, responding to low-priority emails, and listening to the unsolicited opinions of unqualified observers. Every piece of external noise you admit into your mind acts as a contaminant in your psychological soil, draining the cognitive bandwidth you desperately need to solve the primary challenge. The mental fortress. External noise / / emails / opinions, / gates / blocked, / closed / primary objective, focused execution. The practical tool, the attention audit. When pressure spikes to an operational ceiling, you must immediately implement an emergency attention audit. Drop the drawbridge and close the gates of your mental fortress by executing the following protocol. 0 inputs, close every browser tab that is not directly related to the immediate problem. Place your communication devices on strict, do not disturb, mode. Move them to another room if necessary. The single variable directive. Identify the single next macro move that will actually shift the needle. Disregard variables 3, 4, and 5. The rule of 3 emphases. Apply the rule of 3 to your immediate labor, one step, then the next, then the result. Do not think about finishing the project, think about completing the current sentence. Do not think about saving the quarter, think about executing the current call. The identity anchor. My attention builds my reality. Chapter 6, The Invisible Progress. The paradox. The most profound growth is entirely silent. The modern world demands immediate, loud validation. It insists that you broadcast your journey, display your wins, and market your evolution in real time. But high-performance psychology requires you to fall deeply in love with the dark, quiet, unglamorous rooms of preparation. The architecture of a skyscraper is not judged by its glass facade, but by the concrete pilings driven deep into the bedrock where no one will ever see them. The psychological mechanism. The human brain is highly sensitive to dopamine loops. When you are fixing your internal systems, refining your operational workflows, or training your emotional control under pressure, your external reality does not alter itself instantly. The numbers may remain stagnant for weeks, the critics may continue to doubt you. Because the untrained mind cannot see an immediate, tangible return on its cognitive investment, it falsely concludes that the strategy is failing. It panics, abandons the disciplined infrastructure, and returns to chaotic, reactive behaviors just before the systemic shift occurs. The practical tool, the invisible season protocol. To survive the lag between internal mastery and external results, you must implement the invisible season protocol. Commit to an unshakable 30-day operational block governed by the following rules. Internal metrics only. For 30 days, your daily success is measured exclusively by your internal execution. Did you maintain your 4-second calibration? Did you run the fact-story separation? Did you protect your focus? The media embargo. Cease all seeking of outside validation. Do not look for praise from superiors, do not check the commentary of peers, and do not post about your efforts. The bedrock log. Every evening, document your daily calibration metrics in a private journal. Treat these entries as a structural blueprint of a hidden foundation. Remind yourself daily of the fundamental law of nature: the roots must grow deep into the dark earth before the tree can ever rise into the light. The identity anchor. I execute in silence. Chapter 7, The Leadership of the Inner Voice. The paradox. Your internal critic is a terrible strategist. When the pressure is maximized, most individuals allow their inner voice to morph into a frantic, abusive critic that points out historical flaws, predicts future catastrophes, and highlights personal inadequacies. They believe this self-flagellation is a form of discipline. It is not. It is an act of internal sabotage. To navigate high-stakes landscapes, you must stop listening to your default inner voice and start actively commanding it. The psychological mechanism. Left unmonitored, your default internal script is highly susceptible to emotional contagion. When stress levels rise, the subconscious brain pulls historical recordings of every criticism, failure, and insecurity you have ever experienced, projecting them onto your current situation. This internal critic consumes immense cognitive fuel. It forces your nervous system into a continuous state of defensiveness against itself, lowering your situational awareness and crippling your capacity to execute complex tasks. Defective loop. Stress, default critic, internal defensiveness, high cognitive load, failure. Command loop. Stressed commander voice, clinical directives, low cognitive load, execution. The practical tool, the commander dialogue. You must re-engineer your inner voice using the commander dialogue. You are no longer an anxious bystander listening to a critic, you are a leader guiding an elite team through hostile territory. Your internal voice must adopt a tone that is steady, clinical, unemotional, and strictly directive. When a mistake occurs or pressure intensifies, immediately interrupt the critic and issue orders using this specific taxonomy. Do not say, "I ruined everything. I always mess up when the stakes are this high. What is wrong with me?" Say, "The current data indicates an operational error in step 2. The error is noted. The corrective action is to reallocate resources to step 3 immediately." Move forward. Speak to your mind like an officer commands a ship. Use precise, structural language, leverage, trajectory, blueprint, calibration, scaffolding. Strip out every adjective that implies hopelessness or permanence. The identity anchor. I lead my internal world. Chapter 8, Identity over Results. The Paradox. Outcomes do not build your identity builds your outcomes. The amateur believes that winning a championship, hitting a financial milestone, or receiving public acclaim will finally make them feel confident and secure. This is a lethal delusion. If you rely on an external win to feel complete, you will always be a slave to the volatile pressure of the next game. The professional establishes their unshakable identity before the battle begins, using that identity as the engine that forces the desired outcome into reality. The psychological mechanism. When your self-worth is tied to fluctuating external variables, such as market conditions, client responses, or social approval, your nervous system remains trapped in a perpetual state of survival. Because those external variables can change at any moment, your brain perceives every high-pressure event as a literal life-or-death scenario for your ego. A single mistake feels like an existential identity crisis rather than a routine data correction, triggering massive emotional spikes that compromise your tactical execution. Outcome-driven paradigm, fragile. External validation, shifting identity, volatile execution, fragile results. Identity-driven paradigm, resilient. Unshakable identity, consistent execution, reframing failures as data, sustainable outcomes. The practical tool, the identity blueprint. Before you step into any high-stakes arena, you must draft your personal identity blueprint. This is an absolute, non-negotiable operational charter written down on paper. Identify 3 unshakable, character-based traits that are entirely under your control and cannot be modified by external circumstances. Example identity blueprint. I am an individual who maintains absolute emotional control under pressure. I execute my duties with precision, regardless of how I feel. I treat every obstacle as raw data for my evolution. Read this blueprint every single morning before you look at a screen, and review it immediately before entering any high-pressure meeting, negotiation, or crisis space. Remind your nervous system that your identity is already secure. You are not fighting for your worth, you are simply executing your blueprint. The identity anchor. I am the process, not the praise. Chapter 9, the 24-hour reset. The paradox. The most efficient way to navigate a massive, multi-year crisis is to radically shorten your operational horizon. When a system is under immense strain, attempting to manage the next 12 months is a form of cognitive suicide. You cannot solve problems that exist only in a hypothetical future. The individual who tries to carry the weight of tomorrow alongside the burden of today will always buckle under the pressure. True mastery requires you to build an absolute firewall around the present day. The psychological mechanism. The human brain is prone to catastrophic projection. When faced with an intense pressure point today, the mind instinctively projects that friction forward across a timeline of months or years, compounding a single, manageable problem into a mountain of future failures. This triggers chronic cognitive fatigue. Your brain burns valuable ATP and cognitive glucose trying to solve variables that haven't even occurred yet, leaving your present self exhausted, overwhelmed, and incapable of executing the basic task right in front of you. Future, hypothetical catastrophes, do not try to solve. Firewall. Present, the current 24 hours, focus 100% of resources here. The practical tool, the 24-hour reset protocol. When the cumulative weight of external expectations, debts, deadlines, or conflicts threatens to paralyze your operational capacity, you must immediately activate the 24-hour reset protocol. Isolate the horizon, draw an absolute psychological boundary around the current day. Mentally declare that the world outside of this 24-hour block does not exist. The 3-block calibration, divide your day into 3 strict operational blocks. The morning calibration, secure your internal state through silence, review your identity blueprint, and outline your primary objectives before the world can inject its noise. The midday execution, move through the chaos with clinical detachment, using the 4-second calibration on every incoming stress signal. The evening secure, review your facts, document your invisible progress, and shut down the command center. Decline tomorrow. If your mind attempts to drag you into a problem that belongs to next week, consciously issue the command, that variable does not exist within today's perimeter. I will solve it when its timeline arrives. Win the day. Then repeat. The identity anchor. I own this day. Chapter 10, The Weapon of Patience. The paradox. Patience is not passive waiting, it is a calculated, aggressive strategy. It is the ultimate manifestation of emotional regulation and tactical maturity. The amateur views patience as weakness, assuming that power always requires immediate, visible force. But the master understands that rushing is a design flaw. Rushing is a clear signal that your environment is controlling you, rather than you controlling your environment. Patience is the art of holding your position so perfectly that the chaos around you is forced to make the first mistake. The psychological mechanism. In a high-pressure environment, your opposition, whether it is a competitor, a difficult counterparty, or a chaotic set of circumstances, wants you to move early. They intentionally apply pressure to trigger your survival instincts, knowing that an emotional, rushed reaction is always a flawed, predictable reaction. When you allow yourself to be rushed, your brain drops its analytical processing and defaults to primitive, defensive mechanics. By refusing to react on their timeline, you disrupt their strategy, preserve your own cognitive resources, and turn their own chaotic energy against them. Untrained mind, premature reaction, strategic defeat. Pressure applied, disciplined mind, strategic wait, opponent overextends a precision strike. The practical tool, the strategic wait. To turn patience into an offensive weapon, deploy the strategic wait during your next high-stakes interaction or structural pivot. When you are provoked, backed into a corner, or pressured to make an immediate, landscape-shifting decision, you will intentionally hold your current position. Do not over-explain. Do not counterattack immediately. Do not scramble to fill the uncomfortable silence. Sit completely still in your command center. Allow the opposing party or the volatile circumstances to burn through their chaotic energy. Watch them talk too much, overextend their resources, and reveal their structural weaknesses out of sheer discomfort. Maintain your composure, analyze the shifting trajectory with absolute clinical coldness, and strike with total force only when the landscape has completely cleared and the leverage is entirely in your hands. The identity anchor. My composure is my ultimate leverage. The conclusion, the invisible season. True psychological transformation does not announce itself with a trumpet. It does not look for social media validation, nor does it require the applause of the crowd. It occurs entirely during your invisible season, those quiet, disciplined, unglamorous moments when you choose to sit in silence rather than react in anger. It happens when you choose to separate facts from stories on a blank piece of paper while the world around you is drowning in self-authored panic. It happens when you build a fortress around your attention, re-engineer your inner voice to speak like a commander, and choose to protect your mental territory with absolute, unyielding ownership. The roots must grow deep into the dark bedrock of the earth long before the tree ever rises above the surface to weather the storm. When you step out of this text and back into the noise of your daily life, remember that you are the sole command center of your reality. The external chaos has no power over you unless you grant it entry through your gates. Treat every crisis as unprocessed data. Treat every pressure point as a calibration exercise for your nervous system. Step forward into the arena with quiet strength, absolute ownership, and complete stillness. The storm will eventually run out of rain, the chaos will eventually burn itself out, but the anchor remains entirely unmoved.